My name is Camille Stratton. I'm 36 years old, and up until a few months ago, I thought I understood the meaning of loyalty, especially family loyalty. I was standing in the middle of our wine cellar's annual harvest gala, surrounded by familiar faces sipping our signature Pinot Noir, when my father clinked his glass and called for quiet. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his deep voice echoing off the barrel-lined walls of Stratton Cellars. "This year's harvest has been one of our best. But more importantly, today marks a new era for our family business. I'm proud to announce our new CEO, my son, Eli Stratton." There was a pause, like the moment before a thunderclap, and then applause. Laughter. Cheers. Smiling faces turning toward Eli, my 31-year-old brother in his tailored navy suit, as he shook hands and accepted congratulations like a war hero returning home. But all I could hear was a ringing in my ears. 6 months earlier, this place, the family legacy, had been on the verge of collapse, drowning in debt, facing foreclosure. My parents had called me in tears, desperate for help. The banks were circling, the creditors were cold, and the cellar was days from being locked up. Without thinking, without negotiating, I transferred $720,000, my entire life savings. Money I'd built from scratch over a decade of working 70-hour weeks as a financial advisor. I'd never taken a penny from my parents. I'd never leaned on the family name. While Eli was getting his MBA funded by them, I was managing other people's retirement futures, and mine. And now, the business I had saved was being handed to the son they had always chosen. I locked eyes with my mother across the room. She approached quickly, her face painted with forced calm. "Camille, honey," she said gently, "we know how much you care about this place, but Eli's business background makes him the natural choice. With that degree of his, he can take Stratton Cellars to the next level." I nodded, smiled even. "Of course," I said, raising my glass toward Eli. "To the new CEO." 2 days later, I drove to the far side of the valley and turned down a winding road that led to the old Stratton Ridge property. The gates opened to reveal rolling hills lined with overgrown vines and a modest but solid cellar building. A woman named Rachel Kim, the property agent, met me at the gates. "It's rough around the edges," she said, unlocking the cellar doors. "But the infrastructure is solid. It's been neglected, not ruined." Inside, the stone floors echoed under our footsteps. Dust hung in the shafts of sunlight, but the smell of oak barrels and residual fermentation still lingered. "I can work with this," I said. She raised an eyebrow. "Most people want modern tasting rooms and tourist traffic. You want the production value." I nodded. "I'm not here for wine selfies. I'm here to make something real." She smiled. "Then you're in the right place." I stood at the loading dock and looked out across the valley. I could see the very edge of my family's estate in the distance, their shiny sign, their sleek tasting room, and behind it, the smug entitlement that had grown stronger than their Cabernet. I turned back to Rachel. "Let's draft an offer." Back in town, the news began to spread. Word had leaked, probably from Nina's carefully placed whispers, that I was suing my own family over a 6-figure investment, that I was planning to start a new wine cellar across the ridge, and that I had the financial records to back up my claims. Eli called me at midnight. "You're making this worse than it has to be," he growled. "We can tie you up in court for years. You'll run out of money before we do." "You know that's not true," I replied. "You saw what I built before I ever came back." Silence. "Besides," I added, "do you really want this going to court? Discovery means your coaching invoices, the SUV, Mom's research trip, all of it becomes public record." "I hate you," he muttered. "That's fine," I said, and hung up. There was a pause. I could almost hear him swallow. "You're bluffing." Try me, I replied. You have 30 days. 3 days later, Nina received a call from their attorney, a man named Graham Ellis, who'd represented wineries in Napa for decades. She put him on speakerphone. This is a misunderstanding, he said. Surely Camille doesn't intend to go through with legal action against her own parents? I do, I said. You realize verbal agreements are difficult to enforce. Not when a third party witnessed the entire conversation. Not when the funds were used for personal luxuries and transferred to a shell company. He went quiet. Shell company? He repeated. Nina smiled. Yes. Camille has begun reviewing financial records. She has more than enough to raise flags with the SEC. I'll advise my clients, he said, and hung up. I visited Tom Wu the next morning. He was sitting in his office behind the cellar, stacks of receipts and inventory logs surrounding him like a fortress. Camille, he said, adjusting his glasses, I figured I'd be seeing you. You were there the day I made the transfer. You heard the promises. Tom sighed, then nodded. Yes, I did. I told your father we needed a written agreement. He refused. I need you to testify, I said. He looked genuinely pained. You know I've worked for your family for 15 years. I watched you grow up. And now you're watching them steal from me. He tapped his pen on the desk, then finally said, I'll prepare a statement. But I want it clear. I'm doing this because it's the truth, not because I'm picking sides. That's all I need. The next day, Nina and I reviewed Tom's sworn affidavit. It was damning. It detailed not only the verbal agreement, but also the growing discomfort Tom had felt as the family began reallocating Camille's investment into non-business expenses, Eli's private executive coaching sessions, a new SUV registered as a delivery vehicle, and a marketing retreat that was actually a luxury vacation to Italy. They're cooked, Nina said. The only question now is, how do you want to end this? I want my money back, with interest, and I want out. They can keep their cellar. Nina grinned. Good, because I have something else to show you. She turned her laptop around and revealed a property listing, Stratton Ridge Cellars, the original name of our great-grandfather's land, long since sold off, now back on the market. High elevation, excellent drainage, modern production equipment, half the size of Stratton Cellars, but twice the opportunity. I thought you might like a fresh start, she said. I stared at the screen for a long moment. The wine cellar was nestled just across the valley from my parents' estate, close enough to see the storm coming. Let's schedule a viewing. She looked up. Camille, I know this is hard to hear, but what they did? That's fraud. Verbal inducement followed by asset exclusion, especially if that money wasn't used fully for the business. It wasn't, I said quietly. They renovated the tasting room, upgraded Eli's car, sent him to a 2-week MBA executive retreat in Switzerland. She scribbled something down. And did anyone else witness the original agreement? Tom Wu, I replied. He's been our accountant for years. He was there when I visited to finalize the transfer. He even warned us to put it in writing, but my father waved it off. Said it was insulting to question family trust. Nina's eyes lit up. If Tom backs your version, we've got leverage. But first, we draft a demand letter. You tell me what you want. I want my money back, I said. All of it. With interest. No control of the business? No shares? No, I said. Let Eli have the title. I'll build something better. Nina grinned. Now that's a move I can work with. That night, I returned to my apartment with a flicker of clarity I hadn't felt in weeks. I pulled out my laptop, searched listings, and found a familiar name, Sage Ridge Cellars. A smaller operation, but with rich soil and high elevation, just across the ridge from Stratton Cellars, and available. I clicked Save Listing. They may have written me out of their plans, but I was already drafting my own. But inside, I was frozen, hollow. The applause seemed to echo endlessly, bouncing between the polished barrels and polished lies. I stepped outside into the cool Napa evening, heels clicking against the stone walkway. The scent of crushed grapes and toasted oak filled the air. But it didn't calm me. I reached into my clutch and pulled out my phone. I scrolled to a contact I hadn't thought I'd ever need. Nina Delgado, a powerhouse attorney who specialized in wine industry contracts. We'd met at a conference in Santa Rosa the year before, where she'd given a brutally honest talk about family-run businesses and how sentimentality often masked betrayal. Me. Need your help. Family business matter. Urgent. Nina. Tomorrow, 9 a.m. My office. Bring everything. I spent the rest of the night lying awake in my childhood bedroom, the same one I decorated with grapevine stencils when I was 14. My parents were just down the hall, talking and laughing like they hadn't just erased me from the legacy I'd paid to protect. Nina's office in downtown Napa overlooked the valley. Sunlight poured in, but she was all shadow and sharp lines. Long black hair, steel gray blazer, and eyes that didn't miss a thing. She flipped through the bank documents I handed her. The wire transfer, the email chain, the dated notes from the night my father called me in desperation. "No contract?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "They're my family," I said flatly. "We agreed verbally. Dad said I'd have a permanent executive role. Ownership rights. He said they'd take care of me." Nina leaned back, tapping her pen against the folder. "And now they've installed Eli as CEO without even mentioning it to you. No board vote, no shareholder agreement, just a surprise announcement at the gala." I didn't respond. The next morning, I arrived at Nina Delgado's office with a stronger sense of purpose than I'd felt in months. My hands still trembled slightly from everything I was about to do, sue my own parents. But the moment I stepped through those glass doors and saw Nina's cool, composed expression, my doubts took a back seat. She slid a printed draft of the demand letter across her desk. "This is what we're sending," she said. $720,000 plus 8% annual interest, 30 days to repay, or we file a lawsuit alleging financial misrepresentation, breach of oral contract, and fraudulent misallocation of funds. I stared at the letter. It was clean, professional, ruthless. "They're going to be furious," I said. "Let them be. Fury is good. It means we have their attention." Nina leaned forward, her eyes sharp. "Camille, I need you to tell me exactly what your parents said the night you agreed to transfer the money." I closed my eyes and took a breath, reaching back to that night 6 months ago. The panic in my father's voice. The guilt in my mother's sobs. "They said I was the only one they could trust," I began. "That if I helped save Stratton Cellars, I'd have a secured place in the business. Dad said, and I quote, 'This will make you a part owner. You've earned that much.'" Nina nodded. "Did you record the conversation? Any follow-up emails?" "No. Just the transfer documents. And Tom Wu was there. He heard everything. Tom's testimony could make this bulletproof," she said. "If he's willing to go on record." I paused. "He's loyal, but he's been with our family for years. He'll be conflicted." "Then he needs to decide where that loyalty lies. Truth or corruption." Nina handed me the letter, now in a pristine envelope. "Drop this off personally. Make sure they see your face when they read it." I drove straight to Stratton Cellars that afternoon. The gravel crunched under my tires as I pulled into the circular drive. My parents were in the main tasting room, entertaining distributors from Sacramento. Eli was nowhere in sight. My mother's smile faltered as I entered. My father stiffened behind the counter. "Camille," he said, his voice clipped. "Didn't expect you back so soon." I handed him the envelope. You'll want to read that in private. He looked at the label. His jaw tightened. What is this? My official demand for repayment, I said. I gave you everything I had to save this place. You gave the CEO title to Eli. Now I want my investment back. My mother's eyes widened. You're serious? Completely. You'd sue your own family? No, I said, but I'll sue business partners who committed fraud. And with that, I turned and walked out, ignoring the stunned silence behind me. That night, Eli called me. I almost didn't pick up. Camille, what the hell are you doing? He snapped. A lawsuit? Are you out of your mind? I asked for repayment. Not blood, I said coolly. You're going to destroy everything. This business. Our parents' reputation. I didn't destroy anything, I saved it. And you all pretended it was a gift. He scoffed. You can't prove any of it. Tom Wu can. By Monday, Nina had drafted the escalation letter. It wasn't just a second demand. It was a line in the sand. This document gives them 48 hours, she said, tapping her pen on the letterhead. Full repayment plus interest. If they don't comply, we file with the SEC. And Camille? This isn't an idle threat anymore. With Tom's documents and testimony, the fraud case is real. I signed the bottom of the letter with hands that didn't shake. Not this time. We couriered it to the Stratton residence, addressed jointly to my parents and Eli. They wouldn't be able to pretend they didn't know what was coming. Then we waited. On Tuesday morning, I got a call from Eli. Are you insane? He barked. You're threatening our entire family business. I stayed silent. You could destroy everything Grandpa built just to make a point. No, I replied coolly. I'm reclaiming what I saved, and what you tried to erase. He huffed. You don't want this smoke, Camille. We have lawyers too. Then tell your lawyers to call mine, I said, and hung up. 10 minutes later, a new text came through. It was from an unknown number. I clicked it open. You're not just hurting your family. There are workers who depend on this place. Are you ready to see people lose their jobs because you couldn't let your little brother lead? No name, no number. But the guilt trip was unmistakable. I forwarded it to Nina. She responded instantly. Classic tactic. They're trying to make this about anything but the fraud. Stay the course. The next morning, my mother showed up at my office with a manila envelope. I wanted to talk without lawyers, she said. I opened the envelope. Inside was a cashier's check for $480,000. That's what we could get from a private lender on short notice, she explained. We can pay the rest in monthly installments. That's not the deal, I said. $720,000 plus 8% interest in full. Or the SEC gets everything. Camille, we're your family. You stopped being family the day you handed my money to Eli and called it vision. Her jaw tightened. You've changed. No, I said, rising. I've just stopped pretending loyalty means obedience. I handed the envelope back. If you want peace, you know what it costs. That night, I drove back up to Stratton Ridge Cellars. Rachel Kim met me at the gate. The offer is still good, she said, holding out the paperwork. Owner's motivated, you'll get a good deal. We walked the property under a setting sun. The air smelled of dormant vines and spring promise. This place has bones, Rachel said. So do I replied. Let's finalize it. I signed the purchase intent the next morning. Across the valley, Stratton Cellars was preparing for their spring festival. They had no idea what was coming. Tom Wu called me from a blocked number the next day. There's panic in the office, he said. Your father's trying to get an emergency loan from another lender, but they're asking to audit last year's books. Which means they're stalling, but not for long. There's too much heat. Eli's been snapping at everyone. Your mom's crying in the office. It's chaos. Good, I said. Be careful, Tom warned. They're going to try and turn public sentiment against you, probably paint you as bitter, entitled, emotional. I smiled. Let them. I've got receipts. On Friday, Nina received a formal response from their attorney. They're requesting a 90-day extension, she said, eyes narrowing. I laughed. Absolutely not. We'll reject it, Nina confirmed. Also, you'll want to see this. She handed me a file. Inside was a spreadsheet of all expenses drawn from the business account in the last 6 months. Eli's tuition reimbursement, a $65,000 SUV, a $30,000 tasting room remodel, market research trips to Oregon and Tuscany. They spent it like it was free money, I muttered. Nina nodded. It's criminal, and now they're asking for mercy. They can have it, I said. She raised an eyebrow. In 48 hours, if I have every dime. That weekend, I posted a simple message to my private professional network. I'm launching something new. Clean wine, clean books, clean legacy. Coming soon, Stratton Ridge Cellars. It spread faster than I anticipated. Former colleagues, investors, and even sommeliers reached out asking if I was taking partners. I was. Nina cautioned, don't make too much noise before the deal is closed. But I knew exactly what I was doing. Let them see the alternative. Let them feel the consequence. On Sunday night, I received a call from Rachel Kim. You won't believe who called me, she said. Try me. Eli Stratton. He wanted to schedule a tour of Stratton Ridge. I laughed out loud. They're getting desperate, I said. No, Rachel replied. They're starting to panic. By Monday morning, Nina had prepped 2 folders, one for the SEC filing, one for the formal acquisition of Stratton Ridge. The window is closing, she said. If they don't come through by 5 p.m. tomorrow, I file both. You sure? I looked out her office window at the skyline. They had their chance. Now it's mine. It was the following Friday when my mother showed up at my apartment unannounced, holding a Tupperware container of stew like it could fix everything. I thought we could talk, she said, already walking in. I let her, for now. She placed the container on the kitchen counter and turned to me, her expression somewhere between hopeful and rehearsed. We're family, Camille. Do we really need lawyers involved? I leaned against the counter, arms crossed. We already tried doing it your way. Now we're doing it mine. Her face twisted slightly. You're going to tear us apart over a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? I asked, incredulous. You accepted over $700,000 of my savings and handed the company to Eli, who's never spent a day in the cellar, by the way. She sighed. Your father thought Eli had a better vision for the business side. His MBA? I cut her off. Bought with the same money I gave you. She had the decency to look away. I want it back, I said. With interest. That's the only conversation left. She left the stew and didn't say goodbye when she walked out. Later that evening, Nina called. They're trying to get a bridge loan to repay you, she said, but lenders want to audit their books, and they're refusing. I smiled. Because of the fraud? Because of everything, she replied. We've uncovered 2 shell entities, Stratton Holdings West and Stratton Future Developments. Both recently registered. Guess where a chunk of your money ended up? I didn't respond right away. Nina continued. It looks like they've been moving assets out of the wine cellar company. If you hadn't acted when you did, they could have dissolved the original business, leaving you with nothing. My stomach turned. They were planning this? They were protecting Eli. That's what this has been about since day one. I looked around my apartment. It used to feel like home. Now it felt like a holding space while I figured out how to survive the betrayal. You ready to visit Stratton Ridge? Nina asked. Set it up. The next morning, Nina called with an update. They're desperate. The bank rejected their bridge loan. But I heard from an inside source that they're trying to sell off part of the vineyard. Quietly. Can they do that? It's legally questionable, especially since you're considered an unsecured investor. Which means, if they sell assets before repaying you, we can argue fraudulent conveyance, moving property to avoid a legal obligation. I exhaled slowly. And what happens if they get caught? Worst case, SEC audit. Best case, they settle fast to avoid it. I thought about my grandfather, who had once said that making wine was about patience and pressure. You don't rush it, but you also don't let the grapes rot on the vine. They have 23 days left on that deadline, I said. Let's apply some pressure. A week later, Tom Wu reached out again. I need to meet, he said, voice low. We met at a diner off Route 29. He slid a small stack of documents across the table. I found a payment trail, he whispered. Your parents funneled $110,000 to a shell company, then to Eli's private account. That's not just shady, it's prosecutable. I sat back, staring at the figures. Why are you doing this? I asked. Tom looked genuinely conflicted. Because this used to be a good family business. And because what they did to you, it was theft dressed up as legacy. I left the diner and drove straight to Nina's office. Let's prepare the escalation, I said. She raised an eyebrow. The SEC filing? Let them see what real risk feels like. The moment Nina hit send on the legal ultimatum, the minutes felt like hours. At 4:43 p.m., another call came in. This one from Eli. I didn't answer. At 4:48, my father texted, Dad, this is ridiculous. Call me, don't destroy what we built. What we built? At 4:59 p.m. on the dot, Nina called. Funds are in. Wire cleared. Full amount, plus interest. I didn't say anything at first. Just stared out at the ridge, watching the fog pull back as if the land itself was exhaling. Camille? She asked. They blinked. I whispered. Finally. The relief didn't come as a wave. It came as stillness. Like the silence after a storm, when you realize the roof held and you're still standing. That night, I didn't celebrate. I didn't pour a glass of wine or call anyone. I just opened the Stratton Ridge purchase agreement again and reread every line, not out of doubt, but because I knew this was my next chapter. The next morning, Tom Wu showed up at my front door with a stack of binders and a flash drive. They changed the server passwords. I couldn't access everything, but I got this before they shut me out. Are you okay? I asked. He nodded slowly. I'm fine. I'm out. Tom looked 10 years younger just saying it. I told him, if you're ready to start fresh, I'm putting together a team. His answer was simple. I already packed a bag. We sat at my kitchen table reviewing the materials he'd brought, spreadsheets, vendor records, tax forms that had been quietly altered. It wasn't just sloppy, it was arrogant. But that was behind me now. With the funds back in my account, I moved quickly. I wasn't just trying to launch a business. I was laying the foundation for something unshakable. I called in an organic viticulture specialist from Sonoma. We walked the Stratton Ridge grounds together, testing soil, examining irrigation. He raised his eyebrows. This is a dream property, he said. With your vision, you're sitting on gold. I hired 2 interns from UC Davis with fresh ideas and zero baggage. One of them suggested a mobile-first inventory system that would eventually become our secret weapon. Then I reached out to a local bottling facility known for its speed and discretion. We want to be fast, I told the manager, but we never cut corners. By the end of the week, we had our first production timeline mapped out. Meanwhile, Stratton Cellars was unraveling. Articles began surfacing, first in niche wine blogs, then in bigger publications. Nina sent them with short subject lines like karma, timing, and my favorite, just FYI. Stratton Cellars faces scrutiny over internal restructuring. former consultant behind Napa's newest organic reserve line, the comeback vineyard, Camille Stratton's second act. I didn't give interviews, but the silence made people talk more. Calls started coming in, first from past clients, then from curious distributors, then a message from one of our old suppliers. "We're done with Stratton Cellars. Too many hoops, too little trust, but we've heard about you. Can we meet?" I scheduled the call for Thursday. On Wednesday evening, I got an alert from an industry event, a retail tasting in San Francisco, with overlapping time slots. Stratton Cellars was slated for 10:15 a.m. We were listed at 11:15. At 9:13 p.m., I got a call from the event coordinator. "Stratton Cellars has withdrawn, no reason given. Are you still confirmed?" "More than ever," I said. I showed up wearing black, carrying 3 bottles, a Viognier with bright stone fruit, a complex Pinot, and a bold, unapologetic Syrah that tasted like truth wrapped in spice. People whispered as they passed by, "That's her. The daughter they cut out? She started her own label. Can you believe it?" I could. I lived it. Every sip they took felt like a little slice of vindication. By the end of the day, we secured a 4-state distribution deal. Back at my rental, I poured myself a glass, not to celebrate, but to reflect. The vines were still young, the hill still quiet, but everything I needed was growing. From that day forward, I wasn't just reclaiming money or reputation. I was reclaiming space. And no one, not Eli, not my parents, not even the old ghosts of doubt, could take that away. 2 months after the funds hit my account, Stratton Ridge Cellars officially became mine. I signed the final paperwork in a small office overlooking the Western Ridge, with Rachel, Kim, and Nina by my side. The seller, a quiet older man named Paul, handed me a leather-bound notebook filled with soil pH data, climate history, and handwritten tips from his decades in the business. "Treat it like family," he said, gripping my hand. "I plan to," I replied, thinking to myself, only this time, the kind of family I choose. I named it Stratton Ridge, not in honor of my family, but as a reclamation. They didn't own the name anymore. I did. Tom Wu resigned from Stratton Cellars the day after their wire transfer. He showed up at my door with 2 cardboard boxes, a USB stick, and a tired smile. "They've already changed the locks," he said, handing me the stick. "It's everything I copied before I left, just in case." "You did more than enough," I told him. "No," he said. "Now I get to do what I love without hiding spreadsheets." I hired him on the spot as CFO. While my parents and Eli scrambled under the bank's oversight, I moved fast. I brought on a vineyard manager with organic certification, hired 3 interns from UC Davis, and partnered with a local bottling facility to speed up production. We weren't just making wine. We were building a brand grounded in truth, transparency, and taste. And the timing? Perfect. Stratton Cellars was reeling. Nina sent me screenshots of articles from wine blogs and business journals. Stratton Cellars faces internal restructuring after allegations of financial misuse. New player in Napa, Stratton Ridge Cellars announces organic reserve line. Legacy interrupted? The Camille Stratton comeback story. I didn't ask for the press, but I didn't mind it either. 3 months later, I got a call from one of our former suppliers. "We're switching," he said. "Your family's impossible to work with now. Too many approvals. Too little trust." Another distributor echoed the same. And then came the moment I hadn't expected. A major retailer requested a tasting for Stratton Ridge. On the same day, Stratton Cellars was scheduled to present their new vintage. They declined. I didn't. At the tasting, I wore black and brought 3 bottles, a crisp Viognier, an earthy Pinot, and our bold new Syrah. People whispered, "Is that her? Is that the daughter they tried to cut out?" Every sip, every compliment, was a balm over the scars they left behind. By the end of the day, we secured a 4-state distribution deal. Stratton Ridge was real. 2 weeks later, I received a package with no return label. Inside was my grandfather's old wine journal, a worn brown leather book with stained pages and faded ink. Tucked inside was a note in my father's handwriting. He would have wanted you to have this. You were always the one who listened. Dad, I stared at it for a long time. Grief, gratitude, closure. Maybe even the beginning of something softer. But not yet. Eli, on the other hand, was unraveling. Tom forwarded an email chain showing Eli had requested $150,000 from the bank for a brand ambassador influencer campaign. It was rejected. Instead, they approved a $10,000 marketing budget with strict tracking and zero control from him. He wasn't used to consequences. But now he had them in spades. Stratton Ridge's first full vintage sold out on pre-order. Our launch event brought sommeliers, wine bloggers, and old clients from my consulting days. People said our Syrah had complexity, that the Pinot had depth. But I knew better. It wasn't just the grapes, it was the truth. Bottled. On the night of the launch, Rachel Kim raised her glass. To starting over, she said. I added, and doing it better. Weeks later, I passed Stratton Cellars on my way to a vendor meeting. Their once busy lot looked empty. The tasting room was closed for internal renovations. Rumor was they were trying to sell. I didn't stop. I didn't need revenge. I had something better. People still ask if I regret it. Taking legal action, standing up to my own parents, cutting ties with Eli, and I say no. Because sometimes family isn't about blood, it's about boundaries. It's about respect. It's about not letting love be an excuse for theft. The hills that once held my heartbreak now hold vines of my own. In 3 years, our first estate vintage will be ready. I plan to call it Reclaimed, because that's exactly what it is. My money, my voice, my legacy, and most of all, my peace.